This is Speaking Freely with the ACLU of Pennsylvania. I'm Andy Hoover, your host and Director of Communications at the ACLU of PA. Historically, America's public schools have been spaces where debates and resistance to civil liberties have played out. From racial integration to political protests, protecting the rights of students has been central to the story of constitutional rights. The times we're in now are no different. So, for this episode, I talked with three advocates who have been helping people organize to support inclusive education in their schools: Alex Domingos of ACLU-PA, Ashli Giles-Perkins of the Education Law Center, and Ronna Dewey of Red Wine and Blue PA. Our organizations are part of a new coalition called Pennsylvanians for Welcoming and Inclusive Schools, or PAWINS. Ashli, Ronna, and Alex talk about why the coalition came together and what you can do if you feel moved to advocate for inclusive education at your school district. This conversation was recorded on April 18th. Ashli, Ronna, Alex, thank you so much for joining me to talk about inclusive schools and things that are happening in districts around the Commonwealth. This is obviously a very timely topic, something that has become really hot in the last 3 years or so. Before we get too far into the topics, I wanted to give all of you a chance to talk a little bit about your organizations and your role there. What does your organization do, and what's your particular role? So, Ashli, why don't you go first? Tell us a little bit about Education Law Center.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me. My name is Ashli Giles-Perkins. I'm a staff attorney at the Education Law Center of Pennsylvania. I'm in the Philadelphia office, but ELC is statewide. We also have an office in Pittsburgh, and we operate a helpline available to families, advocates, and more recently, lots of other folks who call in looking for legal advice or to make alerts about things happening in their respective school districts. More generally, ELC maybe is familiar to others through our fair funding trial for funding public schools equitably across the Commonwealth. And we also do some juvenile justice work and policy reforms, which I work very closely with. And the reason why I'm here, our Honest Education and Inclusive Schools team, we deal a lot with policy analysis, some combating of book bans or censorship, and curriculum restrictions, DEI restrictions, and all of those hot topic things happening right now.
Great, thanks for that. And Ronna, how about Red Wine and Blue? Tell us a little bit about your organization and what you're doing here in PA.
For having me, Andy. So I'm Ronna Dewey. I am the Pennsylvania Program Director for Red Wine and Blue, and we are an empowered community of diverse women, and we work together to defeat extremism. So we train and connect women across the country. We have a network nationally of over 500,000 women. In Pennsylvania, we're at about 15,000. So it's very exciting as we've been growing. So what we do is we train women to organize in their own communities using the power of their own voice, friend-to-friend organizing. So, we train you to talk with all of your friends and family, how to organize in your community, and how to address the growing threats of extremism, particularly to public education, reproductive freedom, and democracy. And as the Pennsylvania Program Director, I lead a staff of 5 organizers, women across the Commonwealth in all corners. And they're, we're not political operatives. We're just women who are doing the work in our own communities. And we're working to just engage and educate and empower women to just make positive changes and fight extremism.
Great. And Alex, you're here in Harrisburg with me at the ACLU of Pennsylvania. Listeners probably know about the ACLU, but it's always nice to hear from various members of our team. You've actually been on this podcast before talking about bail, but you've also been involved in these school issues. So if you can tell us a little bit about your work as a strategist and what your days are like when you're working for the ACLU.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me back, Andy. It's good to be back on the podcast. Like you mentioned, my name is Alex Domingos. I use he, him pronouns. and I'm an advocacy and policy strategist here at the ACLU-PA. So I work across a variety of issue areas. Criminal legal reform is a major focus, as well as immigrants' rights work, and this inclusive education work are sort of my three lanes. So I've been working very closely with Ronna and Ashli for the last couple of years, building this coalition and working on inclusive education efforts. So happy to be able to be here and talk more about that today.
Great. So let's set the table here a little bit and talk about Pennsylvanians for Welcoming and Inclusive Schools. And Alex, can you tell us a little bit about how the coalition came together? It's these three organizations and quite a few others. What were the circumstances that led the partner organizations to think that they needed to get organized?
Sure. So starting in, say, maybe like the summer of 2021, is really when we started seeing getting more and more intakes around issues involving schools, kind of coming out of the COVID lockdown period. We were getting referrals, getting intakes, seeing that, a lot of the anti-masking, like kind of school safety measures, folks were pivoting to, attacking things such as CRT or attacking, certain students that went to school. And we really, starting in Bucks in York County, we were seeing issues like attacks on like DEI committees and book bans. So that really sort of got our antenna raised. And then we started seeing, unfortunately, a lot of the same books being banned or a lot of similar policies start to spread, not only across Bucks County, but across the Commonwealth as a whole. So, we're always working in coalition, working with our allies, and talking with our allies. We're realizing that this was really um, a coordinated, concentrated effort that we were up against, and we realized that it would behoove us to be able to kind of pool our resources and work together to be able to respond effectively. Ultimately, we began this coalition because we're hearing from parents, just average everyday parents and students who woke up one day and saw that their school boards had been taken over by extremists who were pushing harmful policies, and they really wanted help and guidance in how to push back and really protect, students and loved ones that they knew who were being targeted by these policies. So um, around that time, late 2021, a few of our orgs started getting together and figuring out how we could bring in our friends and allies and what we could all bring to the table. I think, our coalition's so great because a lot of our organizations have different expertise, right? Like free speech has been a longstanding uh, kind of priority of ours. Education Law Center has, of course, been holding it down with all things education related. Red, White, and Blue is doing amazing advocacy work, right? So it's where can we be a value add? Where can we help parents, students, school staff, and how can we really combat the attack on really some of the most vulnerable folks in our Commonwealth, and the students who are just trying to, get a good education and take the next step in their lives.
And Ashley, to Alex's point about seeing these different issues pop up, are there particular trends? Are there issues you're seeing in multiple districts? I know sometimes it almost seems like there's been a bit of an arc. Like I noticed this, and Alex mentioned York County, the issues at Central York were really race heavy. And then it seemed to kind of pivot into anti-LGBTQIA issues. So what are the trends? What are the things you're seeing over and over again?
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Timing, I would even go back maybe a year or two. I think started to see school districts really, hearing and heeding to community calls for diversity. And there were, calls to teach truth, right? And to there was a pushback in some states where history books described slavery as like internships, and they were all taken care of and everything was fine. And so I think that sort of 2019, 2020 into sort of that summer of real unrest, schools coming in and saying, let's get a diversity committee going, or, what can we do in terms of programming, or, even considering holidays, more inclusive holidays, or how we think of Christopher Columbus and or Indigenous Peoples Day, right? And there's all those sort of things that were happening, and advocates like me would say we're moving in the right direction. And so, right, once you're kind of coming up, I think that what we've seen now, this wave of bringing that back down, right, like a return back to where we were, and that includes, right, rolling back of DEI initiatives and committees and curriculum and books, and was very race focused. And then I think has still been the case, but the target has sort of shifted to LGBTQ students, I think, as a whole. I think we also saw teachers becoming targets, what photos they have displayed on their desk, whether or not they have a Black Lives Matter sign in their window or a pride flag hanging from the chalkboard, and school boards moving to censor those type of affirming, inclusive symbols, to leave students questioning, am I still welcome here? If there was a pride flag on Monday and on Thursday it's stripped down, and if I ask about it, I can get in trouble, what message is that sending? And then I believe as of right now, it's very focused on particularly transgender, gender diverse, non-binary students. When we see bathroom policies coming into play, and locker room, right, and who can play on what teams, and wear what sort of clothes, and use what pronouns. And so there has been guidance for some time now, going on 10 years, as well as the law of Title IX and Title VI, and others, our state anti-discrimination law, as well, that have been very clear, I think, and it's gotten clearer over time through cases and through regulations and guidance and toolkits that DOE and DOJ, et cetera, put out. And so to sort of see this wave when there's been really clear guidance, I think, to do the opposite. For example, schools should be creating affirming policies, right? Schools should be considering LGBTQ students when they're, thinking about how they mark their attendance rolls, or how they, note report cards, and, what they're telling guidance counselors, and what sort of professional development is happening throughout the year. And so we've seen all, sort of progress being both rolled back, and also, maybe Ronna can speak to this, really strong, community members, parents, moms, students themselves, right? I think Central York is a great example, right, of what students getting wind of book bans and saying, you know what, we're going to fight back against this. Parents, I think, record-breaking numbers, right, at school board meetings, a lot of the time, making sure that, I think, accountability and transparency has been another huge trend lately, right? Sunshine Act violations. What's the Sunshine Act? People being like, I can file a right to know request. It's like, yes, you as a citizen, yes, you can, right? You can say, hey, school board, I want those school board meeting minutes, right? And so we've also seen that, I think, maybe on the more positive side of people knowing their rights, knowing what violations to look for, knowing, affirming things to say to students who may otherwise feel under attack and feel targeted, to let them know that there's people standing up and standing with you.
I'm glad you mentioned that about the community pushback, Ashli, because, people hear the ACLU and they think, sue the bastards. At ELC, it's similar, you have a strong legal arm, but both of our organizations do advocacy as well. And more often than not, it seems that that's where the fight is. There are only so many opportunities to be in court. But when local folks rise up and push back, that's where the real power is. And to that point, Ronna, there are 500 school districts in Pennsylvania, which is remarkable. When people come from other states, they're sort of amazed by the number of districts in this state. So obviously these struggles are hyper localized. What's your advice for people who want to get active in their district, but they don't know where to start? They've never done this before. How does PAWINS provide support to folks at the local level?
Absolutely agree with everything Ashli was saying. You know, the power really is with the people, and we have been amazed at the strength of the parents who are showing up and speaking out on the local level and throughout the entire state. So that's been amazing to watch. But I would say a lot of hyper-local organizing really seems to happen on social media. That seems to be the best place where people find out what's going on. So I would tell anyone who wanted to get involved, and you didn't know where to start, that you should just start paying attention, like who's posting and sharing about what's happening in the school district on either the school district page, community pages, or just amongst your friends. And start with those people, find the like-minded people and go from there. You can also go to the school board meeting. You're going to definitely say, I know when I go to my local school board meeting, it tends to be one group sits on the left, one group sits on the right, and you kind of pretty quickly figure out which group you want to sit with. And that's a great way also to get started. So I will speak about red, wine, and blue because this is really what we do. We call ourselves troublemakers, and weekly we have virtual trainings called Troublemaker Trainings. And we also have a downloadable Troublemaker Guide. And what both of those offer are resources and support for how to build your own network and how to build your own grassroots groups. And because we're starting to grow, you might think that there's no one in your community who thinks the same way that you do. But if you come to us, we may be able to connect you with a group that's already functioning within the community. So that's from Red, Wine, and Blue. But at PAWINS, it's been wonderful to work with all the different organizations. And one thing we do as PAWINS is host monthly advocate meetings. And this is where groups or individual parents can come together and they share resources and experiences and get support. And it's really been amazing to actually watch groups from, say, Central York or Central Bucks really start to lead some of these other groups and offer advice about how they were able to have success. And we also usually have a presenter on those meetings, and they'll educate about important issues. Ashli mentioned parents using right to know requests. So we'll do education about how do you file a right to know request, what are sunshine laws, how do you find policies or agendas on your school district's website. So that's one way that we provide support. And also, if you go to the PAWINS website, there's a whole bunch of resources of all of the coalition groups that you can easily access right from a one-stop shop.
So we know that there are organizations on the other side. Moms for Liberty is quite infamous at this point, but here in Pennsylvania, there's another group that has been advising districts, and that's the Independence Law Center. We've gotten a lot of questions about their involvement in districts. Ashli, can you tell us a little bit about who is ILC and why is their advocacy so problematic?
Yeah, and I won't mince any words, right? Just from what their own website and such say, Independence Law Center is the legal arm of a larger nonprofit organization, which is the Pennsylvania or PA Family Institute. And so they do promote a religious perspective and just to sort of restore public life to traditional foundational principles and values is what they stand for. They also have a goal of Pennsylvania to be a place where God is honored, religious freedom flourishes, families thrive, and life is cherished, quote, end quote, right? And so I think that that sort of direct involvement with schools is where we run into at least legal problems, right? The Constitution prohibits religious indoctrination in public schools. There are other types of schools where it would not be prohibited, but particularly it becomes problematic when the government, right, or school directors, agencies, and actors, superintendents or school board members, et cetera, can be considered to have that sort of role, to not be promoting, right, or affiliating itself with anyone or any religious doctrine or organization, right? And so that second piece is also really helpful. You know, public school policies can't be dictated by religious views. This is violations of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. For all of our legal listeners who are wondering where this language is coming from. And so really when a public school bases their school board policy on religious perspectives, you get into that, you know, funky red flag territory, right? School board policies should be rooted in the law, right? And rooted in obligations, and not religious perspectives. And so when we think, particularly going back to what I was sharing about, you know, sort of this shifting, you know, canon facing towards Black students and LGBTQ students and transgender students, right? And thinking of that when we look at a lot of schools' missions, right? And when we look at model policies from the state, right? It's like all students are welcome here. We're going to uphold all students' rights and protect everyone. And they're going to have a safe, healthy environment to learn where they can be their best selves for the future, right? Like some sort of wording like that you'll find on, I'd like to say, all 500 of our public school districts, you know, websites and mission statements. And so when we say all, the state and the federal government mean all, right? And so when you have religious organizations that will pull out particular groups of students, right, children, and to say, not those guys, though. Those people we're going to treat differently. We're going to change our policies even and explicitly target them, not just in actions and individual movements, but with using basically our school laws to you know, it's discriminatory to do that. There's other civil rights at play. So Independence Law Center, at least from education law centers viewpoint, you know, we're getting calls from families. You know, they're attending local school board meetings and they're saying, you know, Independence gave a presentation, or ILC met with our school board behind closed doors, and the following meeting or the very next, you know, hour, right? Because sometimes there's a subcommittee or a small group or a session and then the full school board meeting. And they'll say, and this policy seems to have come out of that, right? So we've moved from giving advice, giving a presentation, you know, sharing information, to writing, directing policy, preparing speeches for superintendents and for board members, talking points, graphics, right? Handouts. Now we've crossed over into religious, you know, organizations, indoctrination information being used to influence public school board policies that impact all of the public school children that attend in that district. So that's mostly what, you know, what we've been seeing about ILC.
And we've seen them in a variety of counties: York, Cumberland, Lancaster, Bucks. It's very they're very active. And I guess the lesson for anybody listening to this, as soon as you hear or see of this organization in your district, look out for a couple of reasons. One, because of what you just described, which is they're advocating for policies that are harmful to students. And two, it actually could get your district in some legal trouble too, because some of the policies they've advocated for have caused legal trouble for districts.
Expensive legal trouble.
Yep. Alex, ACLU-PA is fortunate to have some infrastructure in our legislative advocacy work, and PAWINS is also tracking what's happening at the state legislature. What's happening there, for better or for worse, that listeners should be aware of?
Sure, this is a good question. Interestingly, Pennsylvania is a local control state, so we see that a lot of the action is happening like at the school board level. But as you know, and we talk about in a lot of contexts, the PA legislature is always busy, for better or for worse. So some of the bills that we've been keeping an eye out on and advocating against are a couple book ban bills, one in the Senate from Senator Ryan Aument, and one in the House from Representative Gleim. So we're keeping an eye on those and of course advocating against them at every point. There are some good bills that we are supporting and hoping to see enacted. So there's HB 771, which is a bill promoting the instruction of diverse histories, including for Black and Brown folks. And there's a very promising bill package that was introduced recently that I know Ashli and I and some folks or other organizations were lucky enough to be at a press conference around a lot of these bills. So there's HB 1997 for Representative Ginst, which is about non-discrimination for trans folks. HB 1999 from Rep. Hohenstein, which is about inclusive education, including LGBTQ folks. In like curriculums, there's House Bill 1999 for Representative Takak, which is an anti-bullying measure, including trans and gender diverse folks. And there's HB 2024 from Rep. Smith Wade L about school facilities, so like restrooms and locker rooms, things like that. I'll also flag HB 1394 from Rep. Mays, which is the Crown Act as well, which prevents like hair discrimination, which is also a very important issue. So although like I said, most of our work is at the school board level, the legislature always keeps us busy. So we're keeping an eye out, and we have a subcommittee that's part of PAWINS where we focus on a lot of the state legislation and staying busy down here in Harrisburg, making sure that at the state level, we're not passing anything harmful and that we're hopefully making some progress in preventing harmful policies from being enacted locally.
Yeah, I think that's really good and important. I mean, it can feel like the legislature has a degree of inertia because it's split government. The Republicans have the majority in the Senate, the Democrats have the majority in the House. We have a Democratic governor. But I mean, if a bill moves, that gets attention, it gets press coverage, and it continues the conversation, whether it's a bad bill or a good bill. And it's important, I think, for organizations like ours and for the full PAWINS coalition to be pushing back, because it just adds to that atmosphere and that environment around those issues. Ronna, can you tell us something good? What kind of things are you seeing coming from this work? What are the positives that are happening at school districts and that PAWINS is supporting?
Yeah, so in November, we certainly had some pretty big wins. Places like Central Bucks, Penn Ridge, Perkiomen Valley, and Central York, they flipped their entire boards to have a majority of school directors who are pro-public education, and they believe in creating welcoming and inclusive schools for all. But even more than that, when I think of the organizing that we're seeing that's surrounding the extremism in schools, I immediately think about like the community building I'm seeing. These groups are doing more than just going to the school board and voicing their opinions. They're raising money for other community groups. They're helping the schools run events. They're just doing so much more. And really the friendships that I see have formed, people are really bonding over this and finding their people. And I think that's a pretty awesome story. And what's really great is I'm seeing just regular people who always said, oh, I'm not involved in politics. I don't want to be involved in politics. And they're showing up because this is beyond politics, right? It's about creating these safe and welcoming and inclusive spaces and, coming together over values and what's right. And for me, that's just been just such a joy to watch. So what I see these groups doing is promoting creating safe and welcoming and inclusive spaces for all children. And It's about solving actual problems that exist in our public schools, like lack of funding, class size, qualified teachers, safe buildings. And the extremists, they're just, they're trying to ban books and they're creating policies that are harmful. And so they're just creating problems and hurting students, and they're not actually solving any of the real issues that are happening in our public schools. And, we don't stop at the election. So we had these wins in November. We didn't have, there were plenty of places where there weren't wins, but these groups are continuing to organize, win or lose. They're holding their school boards accountable. And, organizing doesn't stop at the elections. It's year round. And that's what PAWINS is here for. Our coalition partners are here to offer year round support and not just, coalescing around electoral work. It's really about, as Alex was saying, like what's happening in each individual school district and supporting as best we can.
And that all exists in one big ecosystem. What's happening between elections impacts elections as well. Ronna, can you tell us where folks can go to learn more about Red Wine and Blue PA?
Sure, yeah. Our website is redwine.blue, and you can find all things about our national organization there. We also have a Facebook page that is, if you just search on Facebook, Pennsylvania Red Wine and Blue, you can reach out there.
Great. And Ashli, how about ELC? If folks want to learn more about Education Law Center, where should they head?
Yeah, website www.elc-pa.org. And I will also add that in addition to our, our statewide helpline, because we're, free legal services nonprofit. We have tons of resources online. For example, I mentioned a couple instances that have happened. I didn't throw any school districts under the bus by name, but those letters are on our website, right? So we wrote about a policy in one district regarding bathrooms, and another about pronouns and different issues. We also don't just do inclusive schools, right? So if folks have questions about special education or school funding or students experiencing homelessness or involved in the justice system or foster care, really any educational issue. I would also say to follow us on Twitter and Facebook. You're getting more live updates, right? Press releases and things that are happening that are coming out each day. So go to our website and it'll link you to all of our resources, toolkits, social media links, and more.
Great, thanks. And Alex, how about if folks want to learn more about PAWINS, where can they go? And I know you want to offer a closing thought here for our conversation too.
Sure. Thanks, Andy. To find out more about PAWINS, please visit our website. It's pawins.org. There you'll be able to find resources, kind of model policies. We're going to have legislation up there soon. So it's really a great one-stop shop if you're trying to learn more or get involved in this work. And it's also a way that you can connect with us, kind of, instead of going to our individual websites, which you should still visit. But if you want to get us all at the same time, pawins.org. And then you also find a way that you can join our coalition as well. So those monthly meetings we talked about, that's the way to get plugged into those. Yeah, and just in closing, I just want to thank everyone for listening. I just want to encourage you that if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, you have a voice, and we definitely would love for you to get involved, particularly if you're a student. Students have really incredibly powerful voices, and you all getting involved is key to moving inclusive education forward, because after all, you are the ones that have to deal with these environments that are created by harmful school boards. And you're the ones that are experts in your own lives and histories, right, and stories. So we definitely need those, and just want to encourage folks that these are tough kind of times to go through. Getting up in front of a hostile school board can be tough, but always remember that there's more of us than them, right? the average person doesn't want their school board to be an embarrassment, to be in the news every day for harming students or for hateful, embarrassing remarks being spewed in school boards. So, it's on us to band together, multiply each other's voices and efforts, and hopefully win a future where all schools are inclusive and welcoming for all students.
Great. Thanks, Alex, Ashli, Ron. I really appreciate the conversation and appreciate your work. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Yes, thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Ashli Giles-Perkins of Education Law Center, Ronna Dewey of Red Wine and Blue PA, and Alex Domingos of ACLU-PA. Be sure to check out PAWINS.org to learn more about the coalition Pennsylvanians for Welcoming and Inclusive Schools. Select episodes of Speaking Freely are available on our YouTube channel, including this one. Check us out on YouTube with the handle ACLU-PA and smash that subscribe button for all of our video updates. That brings episode 84 to a close. The editor of Speaking Freely is Natalie Montero. Our opening theme is by Moody Finn, and our closing theme is by Elliot. Both are courtesy of bensound.com. The executive director of the ACLU of Pennsylvania is Mike Lee. I'm Andy Hoover. Until next time, be free.